What's up guys, as you can see I recently hit 5,000 solo victories, and that's why today I bring you the best solo showdown guide with all the tips and tricks that you need to know to master your solo showdown game and gain those new ranks. Now let's go into the first couple of tips. The first tip is to not focus on kills, but rather in Showdown, focus on survival, right? In Showdown, you gain trophies not based on how many kills you got during a game, but rather the placement that you have. Out of 10 brawlers, what place were you able to secure? And this is why a lot of things that you want to be focusing on is not trying to be aggressive or trying to be too over the top, showy or flashy. You want to just play passive and chill out for the most part. Wait for good opportunities, but for the most part, don't overextend yourself. Try to play a little bit passively and just let the other people do the work for you. There's no need to go crazy aggressive when at the end of the day, all that matters is your position. The second tip I want to give you is that positioning is key, right? A lot of times we tend to forget that positioning makes such a big difference, especially on maps that are not symmetrical, right? The reasoning why you want to be positional and really be focused on that is because you never want to get sandwiched, right? You don't want to get third-partied. For example, if you're playing a Tick, you don't want to get sandwiched between a Mortis and a Daryl, for example. You want to always be on the edge and have other people fight and then you come in to clean up, so that you're always the one that's reaping the benefits, not the one being targeted. And another thing I can tell you about positioning is in solo showdown on many maps, it's always best to be towards the bottom of the map simply because you're able to see farther up than you are able farther down. So if you're standing towards the bottom of the map, it actually gives you better vision overall of the entire map. And that's why I say this all the time, right? If you're trying to go from top to bottom, always try to first start off from the bottom. And if you're already spawning in the bottom, just stay there. There's no reason to go all over the place. There's definitely some spawns that are better than others. And in another example I would give is that if you're thinking about positioning, you always got to think about where are the brawlers that are going to be the most dangerous to me, and you want to get away from those brawlers because you want to try to make sure you're securing as good of a position as possible, so don't engage in fights that you know you can't win. The third tip I have for you guys is spinning and camping are okay. A lot of people tend to demonize spinning and camping, saying somehow if you spin or camp then you're not a good player and you're just, basically cheating the system or something, which first of all, spinning and camping are all part of the game. Bushes are in the game for a reason. Like, camping is a very viable strategy, and a lot of times it's what you're gonna have to do if you want to gain those trophies, right? Bush camping is something that a lot of people definitely underestimate, and I see this all the time. If you're going to be playing passively and trying to go for that best position possible, one of the best things you can do is the bush camp, which can help you get an easy kill or sneak up on opponents who aren't aware, who aren't bush checking. Now, although in my opinion teaming isn't the best thing, right? In many situations it's necessary, especially when the entire lobby is teaming. If you're not teaming, you're just gonna get targeted first, right? As the old saying goes, if you can't beat them, join them. Team only when you have to, but sometimes it's all you can do. And honestly, a lot of the times teaming is a strategic thing. Like, if you're not going to team with somebody, then you have to at least, realize that like other people are going to do it because it's just a part of the game. At the end of the day, if you're playing a tank and somebody else is also playing a tank, you're just going to be more likely to team with them, and that's just the fact of the matter is, it's been in the game for 3 years and it will continue to be in the game. There's just nothing you can do about it. And many times, if you look at high trophy showdown gameplay, practically every single person in a lobby is going to team at least once per game because that's just how it is. That's just how Brawl Stars is in Showdown. If you're not teaming, you're just going to get targeted. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's go into the next tip, which is to play brawlers on the right map. I stress this so much. I see people all the time forgetting that there are a lot of resources out there like Brawl Assets and many other websites where you can check and look up to date on the most recent brawlers and also on what brawlers have the highest win percentage. Before you hop into a map, if you're gonna, for example, play Tick, well, make sure you go onto a website like Brawl Assets and check to make sure that Tick actually has a high use rate and a high win rate on that map, because otherwise you're just gonna lose trophies and you're putting yourself in a bad position. It's okay to wait a couple days until a good map actually comes out, because ultimately, if you want to gain positive trophies in Showdown, that's what you're gonna have to do. I see a lot of people, and myself, I used to be guilty of this too, where like I would just say, okay, if I'm gonna push Gene today, now I'm just going to do the showdown map regardless of whether it's good or not, because I just want to get it done. And sure, that's a very tough mentality, but ultimately if you want to just have those easy wins, make sure you're playing brawlers that are good on a map. For example, if you're going to push Tick, you don't want to push him on like Cavern Churn or Feast or Famine. You'd rather push him on a map like Rockwall Brawl. And that's just a simple fact of the matter of using your resources and putting yourself in the best position to succeed, right? The fifth tip I want to give is that gadgets and star powers may be different based on maps. Now, this is something I emphasize all the time, and a classic example I give is bow. right? If you're playing bow on Feast or Famine and Cavern Churn maps where there's a lot of grass, you're going to want to use the star power that gives him the extra vision. You're going to want to use the vision star power because there's a lot of grass and you're going to get a lot of value on it. But this does not mean that you're going to be using this star power for all of the Showdown maps, right? We can't just generalize a star power and say, oh, this star power is good for 3v3, the other star power is good for Showdown. You know, within the actual Showdown category itself, there are very many examples where a specific star power will be good for certain maps but just completely useless on other maps. If you're playing a map like Acid Lakes where there's not a lot of maps, you're not going to want to use Circling Eagle. You're going to want to use a Snare a Bear star power because this is going to provide a lot more value where you're going to be able to stun the enemies because there's practically no bushes on those little maps. Now, once again, I would emphasize that checking the maps and checking the star powers of the brawlers that you have beforehand is going to be very beneficial in many instances. And this is why exactly the gadgets and star powers may be different based on the maps. Same thing with the gadgets, right? The gadgets that you're trying to use may be necessarily good for one map, but maybe on the other maps you don't want to use it. For example, with Piper, on maps where there's a lot of walls, like Rock Wall Brawl, you're going to want to use Auto Aimer, which is going to allow you to deflect a lot of the tanks and jumping brawlers like Edgar and Mortis. Whereas on the map like Dark Passage, you're going to be wanting to use the other gadget, Homemade Recipe, because most of the brawlers on that map are going to be longer range brawlers like Piper, Ruffs, Crow, etc. So you're going to want to use this star power because there's not going to be so many tanks and there's a lot of open areas, so you're going to be ready for that. Right, the next tip I want to give is to learn your matchups. Now, this is another very important tip, right? Matchups are super key in Showdown because, once again, you can be a great player, but if you're in a bad matchup, you're still not going to be able to win. For example, if you're playing a Tick against a Mortis, no matter how good of a player you are, the Mortis is most likely going to beat you. So, once again, learn your matchups, know what brawlers you can face. For example, if you're playing a Jean, make sure you understand what brawlers Jean will excel against, for example, like tanks like Bull, Jackie, Mortis, etc., and what brawlers you're going to struggle against. For example, you know, other long range brawlers like Piper, like Stu, Mr. P, etc. And once you know that, you're going to have a much better understanding of when to play aggro and when to play passive, because once you know what brawlers you can beat, it gives you a much better sense of what to do at the right time. Number 7 is focusing on charging up super very early rather than late. A lot of people I see forget that charging up your super is just as important as getting boxes and power cubes, right? Power cubes are great and everything, and it's great to have extra health and extra damage, but for a lot of brawlers, their super is instrumental, and I give the example of Crow and Terra, for example. With Crow's super is so instrumental both for offense and defense purposes. If you're playing Crow on a solo showdown map, you're going to want to have that super regardless, whether it's to go in and get a quick kill or to run away at an important time. Similarly with Terra, that super is just game changing and allows Terra to do so much more. So you're going to want to make sure you're charging off your super early game before the zone closes in, because by then it's already too late, especially with brawlers like Terra and Crow that take a long time to charge up their super. You want to make sure you're focusing on that early game. You know, like a lot of other showdown players would say, even Money Capital, you want to try to get these supers off early even before you get the boxes sometimes. The next tip I give you is to check the bushes. As obvious as this one may sound, I see this mistake all the time where players will just forget to check bushes. Like, they'll just assume there's no one there because the last time they were looking there was nobody there. But a lot of times, once you go out of a field of vision, people will sneak into bushes, and it's always best to be safe than sorry, right? Check the bush. All it's going to take is one ammo, but it could save you a whole lot of trophies. And it just doesn't matter what type of bush it is. Like, even if it's a very small bush, a very large bush, check it regardless, because once again, you never know who's going to be sneaking in there. The 9th tip I give is intimidation is king. And what I mean by this is, if you have a specific brawler that you're trying to push and you have a very cool skin with it or a very cool emote, you know, show that, flex that, because as, you know, cringy as it sounds, people actually get different reactions based on the skins you're using. For example, if you're playing Mortis and you're using a gold Mortis, you know, a lot of people would be more hesitant to go for you just because of the fact that you're using a gold Mortis skin. A lot of tanks may not even want to go for you. Whereas if you're just using the no hat Mortis skin, people will just assume you're a bad player and they'll just go for you a lot more times, you know, than not. And that's something that's just psychological, right? Players will often just, you know, play based on what they psychologically think. That's just how humans are wired. Same thing with emotes. If you have a very elaborate emote, flex that, show it off to show the opponents, whether or not it's for teaming or just for, intimidation purposes. Because let me tell you something, if you can get people to go for you a lot less often, your chances of getting a higher trophy count will be so much better. In Solo Showdown, the number one thing I hate is when there's players that will literally chase you across the entire map just to take you out. The last and final tip, and this is definitely the most important one, so listen up here, is to play based off of your logic and use your rationale. Do not play based off your emotions, and let me explain what I mean. A lot of times we'll lose trophies, we'll lose a couple games, go on a losing streak, and what happens is we start playing very aggressively because we want to gain those trophies back. So we think to ourselves, if I can just get a few first places, I'll be able to get those trophies back. But that is the actually complete opposite of what you want to be doing. If you're losing a lot of trophies, you actually want to take it a lot slowly and play very, very passively, because you don't want to keep losing trophies, and it's very important that you can start reversing that, right? As humans, we're creatures of habit, so if we can just break that losing cycle one time, it's going to help us out so much psychologically and mentally, giving us that extra confidence. Another thing I'll see is once people start going on a winning streak, they'll just become really cocky and they'll think that, oh, I can just, do anything I want and still win. It doesn't even matter the matchups or how many cubes they have. Like, they'll literally try to go for a baller that has 3 times the cubes that they have. Like, just because you're going on a winning streak doesn't mean you should be too cocky, and just because you're going on a losing streak doesn't mean that you should try and play based off your emotions and try to play too aggro to gain those trophies back. Once again, slow and steady wins the race. It's best to play based off of logic, not rationale, because once you start letting your emotions get in the way, a lot of bad things can happen. Now, those are the top 10 tips that I have for all the Showdown players, whether you're a newbie or a pro. I think these tips will help you out. Let me know in the comment section down below if you were able to take away something from this video, and make sure if you enjoyed this video to be sure to click that subscribe button. Road to 3K. I hope you guys all enjoyed this video, but until next time, I'll catch y'all next time. Yeet!